I recently had the privilege of an exclusive interview, almost an hour long, with Judge Roy Moore, the Chief Justice of the Alabama Supreme Court. I hope that you'll be able to watch this whole show. If you missed yesterday's, you can find it on our website. I'm Randall Terry. This is Voice of Resistance.
Those who forsake the law praise the wicked. Those who uphold the law resist them. Welcome to the Voice of Resistance. Here's your host, Randall Terry.
Welcome to the program, friend. In today's episode, we're going to explore with Judge Moore how this Supreme Court ruling is not law. It's not constitutional. It's not law. And we'll discuss how and why they could and should be impeached. For those of you who are Ted Cruz supporters, you know that Mr. Cruz, Senator Cruz, is out there saying that we need to amend our Constitution so that these judges don't have lifetime appointments and maybe us voters can get them out. I agree with him, but there already is a mechanism in the Constitution to deal with these people. It's called impeachment. And Judge Moore clearly, concisely, constitutionally shows how they have violated their oath of office and they can and should be impeached. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode. I'll talk to you at the end. Do you believe that the judges violated their oath of office?
They're sworn to the Constitution. The Constitution has no word in it about marriage, and that's remarkable. If they're going to redefine a word that's not even in the Constitution, how is that not a violation of the 10th Amendment, which states clearly that the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. There's no power given to the federal government, as Justice Kennedy in his own writing in 2013 in U.S. versus Windsor recognized. There is no power given to the federal government over marriage. That was left to the states. And today that's been taken and a majority has dictated that to the states.
Okay, there's so many politicians right now who are saying that this is outside of the rule of law, that they went beyond their constitutional authority. So we hear all these words, but then if that is the case, is this an impeachable offense?
Well, 4 justices on the Supreme Court, that being Chief Justice Roberts, Justice Scalia, Justice Thomas, and Justice Alito, all said that about the opinion.
Right, that this is basically a lawless.
It was completely outside the Constitution. And basically, even the majority opinion didn't reference the Constitution that much. It represents how they felt about things.
The 5th and 14th Amendment, a really bizarre, twisted...
Well, what about the 5th and 14th Amendment that is strange is back in 1986, the United States Supreme Court, in the case of Bowers versus Hardwick, addressed what the court did here today.
Which said, Bowers versus Hardwick said that the rules against that behavior were constitutional.
They said there's no constitutional right to commit sodomy in the Constitution in 1986. They said, nor are we inclined to take a more expansive view of our authority to discover new fundamental rights embedded in the due process clause. The court is most vulnerable and comes nearest to illegitimacy when it deals with judge-made constitutional law having little or no cognizable roots in the language or the design of the Constitution. That's exactly what it is.
Say that in the vernacular of the common folk.
It says when the court is illegitimate, when judges start making constitutional law which has nothing to do with the Constitution.
There you go.
And using words that are not in the Constitution. It then went on to say, therefore, there should be great resistance to expand the substantive reach of the 5th and 14th Amendment, particularly if it requires redefining a category of rights deemed to be fundamental. Then listen to these words. Otherwise, the judiciary necessarily takes to itself further authority to govern the country without express constitutional authority.
They're usurping power to themselves, making themselves
tyrants.
And
they're governing the country without authority to do so.
So, again, I ask, in your opinion, and I'm inviting you onto thin ice, perhaps, but do you think that they have committed an impeachable offense?
I think they can be impeached. Now, there's 2 ways to impeach, in my opinion.
Okay.
One is the fact that they've just exceeded their authority under the Constitution. And here's the clauses under the Constitution. Article 2, Section 4 says, shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. The other way, under Article 3, is that in such inferior courts, and the judges both of the Supreme and inferior courts shall hold their office during good behavior. And it's questionable whether this is good behavior, and I would say a reason for that. Justice Ginsburg and Justice Kagan both had performed same-sex marriages. And under 28 U.S.C. 455, it requires their recusal when impartiality, quote, may reasonably be questioned. Now, if you're out performing same-sex marriages and then go into a case to determine whether that's legal, and you say under the Constitution of the United States, I think that's when your impartiality may reasonably be questioned.
Right.
You have two choices. I mean, you can try to raise your children by design, or you will raise them by default. There are no perfect parents. We're going to get it wrong sometimes. If we have a plan, we've got a better chance of getting it right in the long run.
There is something deep within the heart of every human being that longs for parental acceptance and approval. When does a boy become a man?
Get a group of guys around and ask them that question.
I don't think there's a certain age. Some men stay boys their whole life.
I would say, 16, 18 years old.
Wow, that's a good question.
When they get bar mitzvah.
Well, I think when he has a child. So I just became at 56, 56 years old.
Without the power of the Holy Spirit changing us and giving us power over our sin, we can't hope to be the dads that our kids need us to be.
They were both notified of this by briefs and by requests for their recusal from the Foundation for Moral Law, even before they heard oral argument.
Well, they didn't
recuse.
So under those two principles, either one of those, well, they could be impeached. I don't think that the political will exists.
No.
But I think that it's a point of law that we need to not let go of personally.
Well, the point I was trying to make is Congress has made rules for recusal. And all the judges across the country are under rules like that, whether state or federal. They knew the rules. They knew there's nobody over them and that Congress is not going to do anything. And they sat on this case, two justices that had performed same-sex marriages.
They're clearly
one,
biased.
Justice Ginsburg performed a same-sex marriage after a notice of recusal was filed in the court on April 27th. It was not noted on the dockets until May 21st, and it was not noted on dockets till after June, actually. And she performed another same-sex marriage, and
they don't care. There's a brazen arrogance there that's breathtaking. And the lack of political courage and will from people like McConnell, Boehner, the people who play to us with their words. We're for marriage, we're for pro-life, blah, blah, blah. But then when really comes time to stand up and to fight, they don't do it, they roll over.
You know, 1986 in Bowers versus Hardwick, that was the case that was brought to the Supreme Court from Georgia in the first test of sodomy. And the Supreme Court found there was no right to commit sodomy under the Constitution. In that case, argued by Lawrence Tribe, who lost, it went down in history as declaring that sodomy was not a right. 17 years later, another justice by the name of Anthony Kennedy found such a right and declared that that was not proper law. What you should know is it was Lawrence Tribe who spoke for Anthony Kennedy to become a member of the bench. And they talked about these specific issues. And this is something that was out on...
They ignored the law, precedent, stare decisis. They want to use it when it's
they
to their benefit.
They set up their own future there.
Let's take a radical turn towards history. In Nuremberg, the underlying principle of Nuremberg was that crimes committed under the color of law cannot be protected.
No, because they were a violation of the higher law.
Right. I mean, the victorious Allies wrestled with this and said, look, we can't allow what they did to go unpunished.
Well, Justice Jackson, who was the United States Supreme Court Justice, is one of the prosecutors, actually. He came off the bench to be a prosecutor at Nuremberg, and he basically declared that you can't get by with murder by saying the state or the Hitler told me to do it. And they say for that you could be prosecuted. And yet today we're not looking to those same laws.
I think some of the most damning words of all of human history are, I was just following orders.
Well, that's exactly what Lieutenant Calley said in Vietnam in the 1960s. And he said that orders were from Captain Medina, his superior officer. The court-martial said it doesn't matter who gives you orders. If it violates the Constitution, it's against the law. And this is certainly like that today in our court system.
What should governors, state attorneys general, state attorneys general be doing right now?
Well, just like Roberts implied, the efficacy of the judgments of the high court are in the hands of the executive and the states. I think the states should be addressing these issues as they see fit, instead of just taking a hands off and saying, well, it's the law of the land.
Right, that's
that
nonsense.
is a great misunderstanding.
Do you want to get America out of the hands of wicked and unjust men and women who are destroying the republic before our eyes, and put leadership back into the hands of righteous men and women so that we don't die as a nation? Well, you're talking about social revolution, and there are rules in social revolution. We can look at the victorious social revolutions of the past, such as the end of slavery, the end of child labor, women's voting rights, the end of segregation, and so much more, and learn from their victories. Look at their actions, their images, their rhetoric, their sacrifices, and their final fruit. We will send you this series that originally cost $129, 7 books for students, 1 teacher's guide, if you'll give a gift of any size and just pay for shipping and handling. Take advantage of it today.
The law of the land is, always has been, always will continue to be the United States Constitution and the laws of the United States made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States. That's what's stated as the law of the land. That's in Article 6, right here. It says, this Constitution and the laws of the United States made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made, shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby, anything in the Constitution or the laws of any state, to the contrary notwithstanding, which means state judges have a very immediate and proper role to play under the Constitution of the United States. It's not just the Constitution of the state they're under the Constitution of the United States, and they must know and interpret that Constitution. And that's one thing we brought up in Alabama when the federal...
If I may, let's come back to what governors should do, or what could they do. In other words, address it from a constitutional argument. I'm the governor of Arizona, I'm the governor of Louisiana, and I say, this decision, I say to
if
the court,
it
I'm
doesn't
not
follow
gonna
the
obey.
Constitution, then their duty is to interpret the Constitution. That's what they're sworn to do.
You're my lawyer. Let's pretend that you're my lawyer. You're some young lawyer is going to, or an old lawyer, a seasoned lawyer is going to advise me. I'm a governor of a state, and I'm saying this decision is from hell, literally from hell, and I'm going to tell the justices, take it back to hell where it came from.
If a decision contradicts the Constitution, it's not law. And if it's not law, then you're not to obey it, if it's contrary to the United States Constitution. Now, many people believe, wrongfully, I might add, that just because the United States, just because one man, Justice Anthony Kennedy, decides for the majority and writes the opinion, as he done in Bowers versus Hardwick in 1986, or I'm sorry,
No,
2003
right.
Lawrence v. Texas,
Right.
and then in
Windsor
in 2013, and now in this case, Oberfeld. Just because he writes it doesn't make it
law.
if it contradicts the Constitution. Now, somebody's going to say, some people are going to say, Chief Justice, you're just a state judge, and you're saying it contradicts the Constitution. I'm quoting Justice Alito, Thomas, Scalia, and Roberts. And they all say it does not
Has nothing to do with the
comport
Constitution.
with the Constitution. Justice Roberts says it had nothing to do with the Constitution. So I'm not saying this on my own. I'm saying this from the four senators. Listen to this. Justice Thomas, the court's decision today is at odds not only with the Constitution, but with the principles on which our nation was built. Supreme Court, Justice Scalia said the Supreme Court of the United States has descended from the disciplined reasoning of John Marshall and Joseph Story to the mystical aphorisms of a fortune cookie. I mean,
there was some really good insults there.
Their criticism of the minority was much more
fierce.
severe
Right.
than I can even quote.
Scalia putting the bag over his head. That was actually funny.
Justice Thomas said the distortion of our Constitution not only ignores the text, it inverts the relationship between the individual and the state in our republic. Today's decision shows, according to Justice Alito, that decades of attempts to restrain the court's abuse of its authority have failed. Now,
if you were a governor, I want you to say the words that you would say when you stood up in front of the microphone, when you called the press conference and said, I am not going to, as the governor of this state who swore an
I'm
oath,
going to follow the Constitution, and the Constitution doesn't tell the states how they should regulate marriage.
So, Mr.
Because
Governor,
marriage is defined as one man and woman, has been, is defined by the Constitution of Alabama.
I have been a leader in the pro-life movement for 30 years. And sadly, we have not prevailed in our goal to make it a criminal act to kill an unborn baby. There's reasons why we have failed. I wrote this book, A Humble Plea, to Catholic bishops, to evangelical clergy, and to lay people, explaining where we went wrong and what we have to do to prevail. We've made this available as a PDF online for free. I encourage you to go and download your own copy. Why does a nice guy like me keep getting thrown in jail? I have been arrested almost 50 times and spent over a year of my life locked up in various prison facilities. And I wrote a book, many books. In fact, one of them is called, Why Does a Nice Guy Like Me Keep Getting Thrown in Jail? It's a theological work, answering those who say that the church should not be involved in politics or that we should retreat. I encourage you to get it. In fact, get one and give it to your pastor. So, Mr. Governor, are you saying that you are not going to tell your various county officials to issue marriage licenses?
That's what, in fact, that's what the Texas governor is basically saying. If it violates their religious liberty, they're not to issue them.
But the ones who say, I believe in this, they're going to still issue them. So the point is where...
Well, if you got a constitutional, it depends on what your constitution, state constitution says. In our state constitution in Alabama, 81% adopted it and said that it is between one man, one woman. That's the law of the state.
So could conceivably, and could a governor be within the law?
Yes.
And say, we're instructing all of our officials, you are to not issue these. We will not honor this decision. We will not abide by it.
And again, when you say within the law, that means what law? And the only law we have is the United States Constitution. The opinion of justice is applied. If it's outside that Constitution, it's not law.
I agree completely. I'll be honest with you. There's people that are watching you right now and listening to you, and their insides are churning because they're watching their country die.
Well,
and they're looking for people to be heroes. They're looking for people to be leaders, to lead us out of this mess, and to stand up to these people. So, what words do those leaders use? What passion must burn in their soul? What's their guiding light?
Well, it varies from state to state. Some governors have just said, well, I'm going to follow the law. And they refer to the justice's opinion. And many say, well, that's now the law of the land. And I keep reminding reporters and people that ask me that the law of the land is not the opinion of a court. Courts don't make law. We all learned that in, schools. The courts don't make laws. Who makes laws? Congress and legislatures. So it's not a law Congress made. The legislature makes laws, and then we have the constitutional amendments, which are laws. And if there's no word about marriage in it, then how do they invent the word to mean something it's never meant?
Well, let's say that
then they find fundamental rights that are not in the Constitution. The fundamental rights, by their own history, is something that's in the long history and tradition of a nation. Same-sex marriage is not in the long history and tradition of a nation. So it can't be a fundamental right. It's a fundamental right because marriage between a man and woman is a fundamental right because it was there to procreate and to educate and maintenance of children.
The first church. What do you think would happen if one governor in this union said, we're not doing it. We're not going to issue licenses. We will not honor licenses from another state. This is a tyrannical ruling. It's completely outside the rule of law, and we're not going to abide by it.
We would certainly call into question this United States Supreme Court ruling, and people would start looking at it pretty well. And it would also be an interposition between the people and a higher authority. And this has happened throughout our history. In fact, it's the reason we're here as a nation.
As Americans.
Because 56 men in the Declaration of Independence interposed. They were representatives of the colonies.
They were representatives of rump parliaments in 13 colonies.
That's right, and they interposed between the people and the King of Great Britain and Parliament of England. And
what do you think the federal government do? What do you think Obama and Holder,
I have no idea what President Obama would do in anything.
If I'm going way out on a limb here, but I've been thinking about this. If a state said, we're not doing it, Texas has in the treaty that they had with the U.S. government to come in as a state, they retained the right to withdraw from the union. If Texas or some other state said, we're done killing our babies, we're done with homosexual marriage, we're done with the tyranny of the federal government and the federal judiciary and the Supreme Court, we're leaving. And we're going to make it a crime again to kill babies, and we're going to protect marriages between a man and a woman.
I don't know what would happen. I mean, it hadn't been done except,
over a bad reason for the slave, the state right to own a slave. There was no right to own a human being.
Yeah,
so that was a false state right.
That's right.
Well, friend, as I said to you, this is one of the most brilliant minds in all of America, and concisely, unapologetically, God-centered. I encourage you, call your senators, especially call Ted Cruz, and say, begin impeachment proceedings against the justices who voted for this. These 5 justices can and should be impeached. It's our right, it's our duty to throw them out for this godless, lawless decision. If you like what you're seeing and hearing on this program, we invite you to help us financially. We are completely listener and viewer supported. So if you're being blessed, if you're enjoying it, please help us if you can. But no matter what, pray for us, and let's fight like heck to get these judges out of office.
you.